What's up, guys? John Stargarian here, and I want to talk briefly about my play on Carla Esparza versus Michelle Waterson. So if you enjoyed the video, please drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And so I played 3 units on Carla Esparza at minus 130, and I believe she's currently lined at about minus 155. And I actually think you could play her all the way up to about minus 190, as I see her at about minus 250 here. And so I think there's still a fair bit of value at the current line, and primarily because I just struggle to see how Waterson can, win minutes here and bank rounds. And I say that because, first of all, let's look at the stand-up, which is where, in theory, Waterson should have a real advantage here. And in the stand-up, both fighters are very low volume. I think Waterson lands around 3.3 strikes per minute and absorbs about 3.8. Whereas I think Carla is about 2.2 and absorbs 2.6. So neither is the most efficient striker in the world. And in terms of who's more skilled, I guess in theory you could say Waterson is, but not by much. So like Waterson, her hands aren't great. All she really has in terms of her legs are, she has a front kick and a side kick, and that's really it. And it's not like she throws those really in volume either. She kind of will just look to kind of plot on the outside, land kicks at a distance, almost like Elias Theodoro, and then look to be opportunistic and see if she can land a takedown via like a head and arm throw or something like that. And, the result has been, throughout her career, whenever she's faced a competent striker, she's gotten lit up pretty badly. And while I wouldn't say Esparza is a good striker either, she actually has decent hands. So, like I said, neither is a good striker. Neither is very efficient. Waterson's probably a little bit more skilled as a striker, but I do think, the distance fighting will be competitive at least. And by that I mean, if this was a straight kickboxing match, I'd favor Waterson, but it wouldn't be by a substantial amount at all. Maybe her being like minus 150 or thereabouts. And so, even if they stayed standing and, Carla loses her mind here and decides to not try to force the grappling here, I think she'd be competitive. But she's not going to lose her mind and not grapple, because that's just not what she does. So if you actually look at the grappling, there's just a significant edge for Esparza here. And so, Esparza attempts about 10 takedowns for 15 minutes, and she lands just over 3. And, Waterson on the other side of the coin, she's been pretty poor throughout her career defending takedowns. She only defends them about 57%, and she really hasn't fought many wrestlers. The best wrestler she fought is probably Jessica Penne, who had significant success on the mat with her. Rose absolutely dominated her there on the mat. And while Rose is a good submission grappler, I don't think she's, the best wrestler per se. She hasn't really been facing good wrestlers, and she's still been getting taken down at a high rate. And when Waterson gets taken down, she tends to play guard. And she's gotten a fair amount of guard subs throughout her career. But that said, first of all, guard subs in general are kind of fluky. And second of all, I wouldn't say her jiu-jitsu is at some super elite level either. So she plays guard and lands the occasional guard sub, but she's been doing it against poor grapplers. And so it's hard for me to think here that she's very likely to get into guard sub against Esparza, who's actually quite a good grappler. And on the other side of the coin, we have Esparza, who, as I mentioned, she attempts takedowns at a very high rate and lands them at a fairly high rate. And what's more is, I think, part of the reason this line is so off, at least in my opinion, it's off. Who knows, maybe I'm wrong. But one of the reasons I think it's so off is I think Esparza is kind of underrated. The biggest thing Esparza lacks as a fighter is really, the athleticism and power of some of the other fighters in the division. But if you look at her losses, the only 2 times she's really been dominated were by Tatiana and Joanna. And the only other 2 losses of her UFC career were against Claudia Gadelha and Ronda Marcos. And you could make a very good argument that she won both of those fights, and she lost them both by split decision. Pretty much everybody else she fought, except for her most recent fight with Grasso, which was super competitive. But, Grasso is also very good as well. She's pretty much been able to control fights on the mat, get them down at will, and just keep the fights where she wants them to be. And that's because, now, if you look at the people she's losing to, they are killers. She has fought absolute killers, and I think it's given, the public kind of the wrong view of who she is. Carla Esparza is a good fighter. If she fights, middling competition, she's going to dominate that competition. And personally, that's how I view Waterson. I think Waterson strung together a couple wins against mediocre competition and an aging Carolina, and the public's backing her a little too hard right now. And, you know, given, like I said, Esparza, she has really dominated fights on the mat against subpar competition, and I kind of see the same thing happening here. I struggle to see, like, we know Esparza is going to attempt takedowns in volume, and I struggle to see how Waterson stops that from happening. So even if we assume, like I said, I think it's not that, I think it's going to be competitive on the feet, but even if we assume Waterson was going to dominate exchanges on the feet here, the question is, will she be able to make up for, what's likely to be anywhere from 6 to 10 minutes of top time for Esparza? And I struggle to see that because she doesn't have a single KO in her career in the UFC. So, like, to make up for that top time, she likely needs to land big shots. And, like, it's not a total impossibility, but it's not likely either. And so, for me, it's like, well, what's the likelihood she gets a guard sub? Well, Esparza has only been subbed once in her career, and it was in her third fight against, who was it? Megumi Fuji, who was 20-0 at the time. And since then, never again. And she's a pretty strong control grappler, and she's pretty responsible when she's in dominant position, and even when she's in poor position. And so the idea that Esparza is going to get subbed here, again, it's possible, but she'd have to make an unlikely mistake for it to happen. And so you can't count on it. And so ultimately, the way I just see this playing out is, it'll be competitive with a slight edge to Waterson on the feet, but, Esparza is probably going to land 1 to 2 takedowns around and just going to be busier in general that way. And so it's going to be very hard for Waterson to offset, the top time and damage from on top that Esparza does. It's just, like I said, the only real ways I think Waterson could win this, maybe she finds a KO, but it's extraordinarily unlikely. Maybe Esparza makes a grappling mistake and gets subbed. And, who knows? Like, I don't think she's likely to hurt Esparza, but maybe she's fortunate and, lands a head kick or two and can steal rounds that way. But in general, I think in terms of the range of possible outcomes here, the majority of the time this fight plays out, this fight's going to be competitive at range, and then Esparza's just going to put kind of bank rounds via top time. And, to me, it's pretty straightforward that way. Like, I see Esparza around minus 250. I don't see a great angle on Waterson here. And so I played Esparza for 3 units at minus 130. And yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe if you did. If you have any questions, drop them in the comment section or contact me on Twitter at MMA Fox. I'm always down for a spirited debate, so follow me if you agree, fade me if you don't. At any rate, enjoy. Let's get some fights going.